let us know that you're listening. Say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. Last week we had some guests from, we had some listeners from India. We had listeners from Australia. So it was really an international affair. So yeah, say hi. Let us know that you're here. Today I'm here with Kathy Robinson. And we're going to be talking about wellness and well-being and lots of great stuff. So I'm really excited for that, and also leadership. So yeah, let us know that you're here. Let us know that you can hear us. I'm going to go look at my thing on LinkedIn and make sure that we are in fact live. Cool. Here we are. We have somebody watching from Inglewood, California. Welcome. Welcome, Manuel. Thank you for watching. And if you have any questions for Kathy during this conversation, please put it in the chat. We will be getting to questions and everything like that. Yeah. All right, cool. So we'll get started in just a minute here. All right, Elizabeth from New York. Thanks for watching. I'm also in New York. Kathy, you're in New Jersey. Am I right about that?
Yeah. Not quite as exotic as India or Australia, but
yeah.
I'm in New Jersey.
How's everything going after this? I know we were talking a little bit about this offline, but how's everything going after the storm?
Yeah, we really got hit with, I think it was tropical storm by the time it got here.
Yeah.
Isaias, but we had downed power lines, and I was off. As an online entrepreneur now, not being online really made me rethink my backup and my redundancy plans. So that it was a good thing, but also too it gave me a couple of days to practice my own wellness practices that
nice.
we'll I'm sure talk about in a little bit, and how to stay calm and literally in the eye of the storm, and to use the time to reflect and make some adjustments. So overall, although it was a very unusual week, it was one that was put to good use.
Awesome. For those of you who are tuning in now and later, I'd love to know how you handled, how you were affected by the storm, and also if you were, how you handled it. I was sharing that I was without power without internet for about 4 hours, and this was actually before the storm, and I was completely useless. But of course, there's nothing you can do when you work online, right? So it's a time to really rethink what our priorities are, right?
Exactly, and with this self-imposed staycation, which was on top of a staycation that we've been having, through the pandemic, it really made me realize that when I was working in corporate, I used to have vacation time planned. I don't do that as an entrepreneur, and so that gave me pause to say, you know what? I have to take care of myself to be able to help others take care of themselves.
Right.
And so it was really good lessons learned.
Right, and that's a really good point, because a lot of us we can work anywhere, anytime, right?
And
so
we love it.
Yeah. But we can still use breaks sometimes. That's awesome. So officially, welcome to Coffee with Entrepreneurs Live. Thank you for joining us. This is Kathy Robinson joining us, and tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days, what Athena Wellness is, and how you fill your days as an entrepreneur.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I would tell you that I've been an entrepreneur at heart probably my whole life. It was very ironic to me that I was actually seen as an entrepreneur when I was in college, voted most likely to become an entrepreneur, and then I went into corporate for 33 years, coming out of school with a lot of debt and going on to joining a Wall Street firm and spending 18 years there, and then spending the last 15 years with a Fortune 250 HCM company, Human Capital Management Company. So coming out of those experiences, I really, as I started to get into my 50s, saying, how do I want to spend my time? And I began to think about what really lights me up. What do I love to do on my time off? And it had to, it spanned, physical activity. I loved nutrition. I loved creativity. I loved more of the esoteric spirituality and being out in nature, and relationships and connectivity. And the connecting thread through all of this was living a good life, living a balanced, you know, well-being, optimized well-being type of life. And so I looked into wellness coaching. And in my last years in corporate, I became a certified wellness coach. I created Athena Wellness Enterprises. And in my last year of corporate, I started to blog and I started to write a book, which was published this year. And now that the book is published and I'm working on Athena Wellness full time, I facilitate writing and meditation groups. I also offer coaching services, and I'm creating a video course that will be up and running sometime this fall. And so it's all products that help busy professionals like I was. How do you, without having to quit your job, how do you enhance your wellness as you're facing all of the challenges that we face when we are busy professionals, whether entrepreneurs or in the corporate world?
I love that, and it's easier said than done, right? Especially as an entrepreneur, I know I could be sitting in front of my computer for 12 hours sometimes.
Without a doubt.
Right. So it's really hard to think about wellness. And, if you're a busy corporate professional, you come home, you lay on the couch afterward and what do you eat? Maybe you order a pizza or something, So why is wellness important for us? And how do we take care of our wellness when we're that kind of busy?
Yeah. Well, I think about, and most of the folks that I serve are more in the leadership position. And so leaders by nature are prone to stress because what do? We have a tendency of putting the needs of others before our own, and we sacrifice our own well-being as a result. And that's just not sustainable over time. You feel the impact to your energy, to your stamina, and your health gets negatively impacted in all the ways that have been well written about. So I have a quote on my wall that says, "Let the life that you live be the lesson you teach." And it reminded me when I was in corporate as well as now that people are looking to me and how I treat myself. The way we treat ourselves really impacts our ability and how we're able to treat and serve others, which we're all doing in some capacity. Right. So if we're balanced and we're healthy, it's easier for us to learn and to grow and to handle when the waves come, like a pandemic or a big storm. As we're hit with these things, corporate disruption, challenges in the workplace, we're much better able to handle that when we are in alignment with ourselves and with our values and taking good care of ourselves. And then we can in turn be of better service to our family, our community, our teams, and our companies, whether they're our own or they're someone else's.
That's great. That's great. So have you been seeing a much bigger focus on wellness in the corporate setting since the pandemic?
So it's very interesting, and it depends, I think, on how people have been impacted. So first of all, there's a whole set of folks that have been keeping this country and the world, global, running, being on the front lines. And so those are folks where if they can take small periods of time to keep themselves in check, that's probably all they can do at the moment because they're so busy serving others. So there's this big ramp up. Some folks have been impacted by the disease itself, whether somebody in the family or themselves, right? So so for the folks that have really been impacted, all I think you can do is do a little bit of self-compassion and self-care and let that be enough for now. For those of us who've had the privilege to work from home or to be sheltering in place, I've seen two ends of the spectrum. One is this is amazing time that they actually can carve out some time to invest in their wealth.
Right.
For those where they haven't been thinking about that, suddenly there's a lot of quiet time. It's very unnerving because the things that have probably been trying to get their attention, that there was too much busyness, they couldn't really pay attention to that. Suddenly it's in the forefront, and if you're not ready for that, revealing, that kind of, it's hard to, like, what do I do with this? And so I think there have been really two camps. Those that have just been, yes, let me do the most I can with the time I have because this is really precious time in a lot of ways.
Right. And
others saying, I know change needs to happen. I don't know what to do here, and it can feel very overwhelming.
Right. And so what are you seeing? What trends are you seeing right now with leaders you know, being during this time? Or are you seeing them focus more on their wellness? You know, how are you helping leaders nowadays?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, because I think not only are leaders changing and teams changing, the workplace is changing and companies are changing. So things that we didn't think were possible, that people could be productive working from home, we see people can be very productive working from home. You know, especially, we know that, those that work from home. But, you know, this is a big corporate shift. And companies are making investments into platforms where collaboration and connection become paramount. And that's part of well-being, being connected and feeling part of a team. Well, how do you do that when everybody's spread out? And everybody has different demands on them right now. People with small kids become teacher, become, you know, after-school activities, and folks that are older, where this may have been a primary point of connection, feel a little bit more isolated. So how do we keep everybody engaged? And so I think we're finding that if companies are willing to make the investment, they realize that this isn't going to be solved tomorrow, that we're planning for longer term. And then what does this mean to the future of the workplace as we go further? And we're seeing studies and trends, especially by the Big Four. Deloitte came out with one not too long ago, that companies are willing to make that investment because first of all, it's the right thing to do for their employees, but now their employees are seeing that there is a need for this. It's not just a nice to do that, oh, maybe I'll do yoga after work, or maybe I'll do meditation, you know, midday, if companies offer those types of services. This becomes a point of connection and of community and of being able to invest. We also, many also lost their commutes. And sometimes those commutes were ways of, almost like morning and evening routines, ways of ramping up to the day, ways of kind of ramping down, and that's gone. So how do we help, again, for long-term sustainability, how do we help employees find ways to ramp up for their day in a way that they feel good, and also how to close the laptop and be in a state of mind where they can be mom and partner and husband and, you know, whoever that significant other is. How do we actually get back to that person and leave the workday behind? So all new challenges.
Yeah. So what suggestions do you have to help maintain work-life balance? I mean, I know we've been laptop entrepreneurs since before this, right? But I think now this kind of advice pertains to everybody.
Absolutely. And, you know, a handful of things. One, I think when we think about wellness, we tend to complicate it. And so the book that I wrote was about simplifying. This is about simple. It's small steps. This isn't I need to completely revamp how I'm eating, or I need to, especially with all the gyms closed, I need to completely think about how I'm actually moving my body. But these are really small steps of taking good care of yourself. So one, I would say, don't overcomplicate it. To be able to set a meaningful wellness intention, whatever that might be for you, and to keep a positive attitude, keep yourself accountable, and just commit to that one little thing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. When I was at my busiest in corporate, I remember I would set my alarm for 5 minutes when I woke up, and I would just lay there with my hand over my heart, take a deep breath, and say, for the next 5 minutes, no one needs anything from you, and there's no decision you need to make. That's simple. But I did it every morning, and what we find is that when we carve out that little bit of time, there's something in us that wants more of that. And over time, it will naturally become a practice, it will naturally increase in time, and you will naturally find other ways to be able to include more of that. So after I did that for a period of time, I may have then had the idea of, you know what, whenever I walk to a meeting, I'm going to walk the long way to the meeting just to get some more movement. Like small things that really collectively over time do make a big impact. So one, I would say to really keep it simple. The second thing is, whatever you choose to do, focus on consistency over quality. So a lot of times when we start something new, we want to start at the advanced level. You know, we need the gear, we need the, you know, all of the stuff. And what you need to do is just to show up in your beginner state and just do it consistently, because that habit, that's what really will form the habit. So you continue to show up for yourself. So being able to not be perfect at something, which I know for a lot of us is hard to do. I raised my hand there too. Like
Same.
That was a hard lesson to learn, but that just doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to happen. And then the last thing that I would say is to have fun learning something new. If whatever it is it should excite you. It shouldn't be a chore. If something feels like a chore, it is probably not the best for you at that time. There's probably other pressures that are kind of feeling like too much at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that could be fun or make you feel a little bit more joy, a little bit more lighthearted to do, rather than something that feels like I have to? So
Right.
I would start there and then kind of build from there. The whole point in taking good care is to live with light in your heart and to be with people that you enjoy and to live that kind of good life. So to be able to start your wellness practices that enhance that feeling, I think is a really great place to start.
I love that. So we have a related question here from
right.
Manuel is listening, and he asked, how do you handle having two career passions? And I guess this is related to work-life balance, right? Because that becomes even more precarious.
Yep. Yeah.
So he's planning to pursue modeling and music production during the pandemic, and it sounds like he's probably got a really full plate, right? Because that's two really different career paths.
Yeah, and when you think about it, I was a chief audit executive, that's one
Yeah.
thing, and then a wellness coach, right? So two things that felt very disparate.
Mm-hmm.
But I would suggest that you pull the lens back and see where the common threads are. So you would think that internal audit and risk management has nothing to do with wellness, but when I really thought about it, the whole methodology and the Athena principles, this book that I wrote, was really based on risk management principles, because I found that wellness is really about the risks you take and the opportunities you take and how you look for actions you can take to mitigate against the risk of poor health. So I would suggest, we said modeling and music.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things? There have to be some commonalities. And so I would look for those commonalities and see how perhaps you can, kill two birds with one stone, to probably not the best analogy, but how do you actually work on both things by working on a something that would further one of those careers?
Yeah.
Also, too, I would go back to what I had suggested on wellness. Start with, there are things that you have to do that don't feel like a whole lot of fun. When we start businesses, we have to set up our books. There are things that I wouldn't say really instill joy in my heart. However, aside from those things, and I would make a list of those must-haves, and for him, and then the things that he really does enjoy. And how do you actually balance micro actions on both of those? So it's almost like a reward. You get to do this one thing that is going to further these careers for him, and then you do one thing that really, as a reward, is something that's related but really gets you excited. Because I think that momentum is what
Right.
keeps you going through those times where it all feels overwhelming. I mean, when I wrote the book and started blogging and I was doing the coaching training, I was traveling around the globe. And so you find these little bits of time, which would be another suggestion I would make. How are you really spending your time? It's amazing how productive you can be, as I was at 4 a.m., and I know that's going to make a lot of people cringe. But if that's the time you have and you have 1 hour and you're doing it consistently, you'd be surprised at how much you get done over a period of time.
So you're an early riser then?
I give myself, now it's 5 a.m.,
Mm-hmm.
but when I had a full-time job, it was 4 a.m. And yeah,
Wow.
I mean, it's great to be able to, at that time, start my workday having had done something on my book, which was the second career.
Yep.
And I also made sure that I exercised and meditated as well. So it was very full mornings, but to be able to start that workday saying, I did something for me,
I love
and
that.
something that's going to pay off long-term, it's almost like an investment, like setting up an investment portfolio.
Sure.
And that's the way that you can think about it.
That's amazing. That's wow. 4 a.m. That's and conversely, I mean, I know that's probably the time that works for you, right? Some
does.
people
I go
work
to bed
better
very
at night,
early. I'm really rising,
You
but
must.
I go to bed early, yes.
You must what? 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock?
I shoot somewhere between 9 and 10.
Yeah. So that sounds about right. But there are people who work well in, later, or people who work well in the middle of the day. So there's always something that you could do. I love that. So you ran an ultra marathon, and you talk about that in your book, and I think it's a really great story. Before you get to that, I want to remind folks, keep the questions coming. That was a great question, Manuel. And we'll get to them. So tell us about your ultra marathon.
Yeah, so the book opens with a scene of me. I'm 54 years old, and I'm crossing this finish line, having just run a 50K ultra marathon. And up until 7 weeks before that, I hadn't run a marathon. I did that a number of weeks before. But the point and the reason why I open up with that scene is for a number of reasons. One, I felt and I feel better in my mid-50s than I did in my mid-30s. And so why would somebody listen to, an ex-chief audit executive on wellness? These practices over 20 years and these principles that I lay out, this is what I have been following. And so the reason why I actually did the run, I started to get interested in endurance sports probably in my early 50s through work. We did collectively, there were about 150 of us that did a charity ride on bikes, and I hadn't been on a bike in like 20 years, from Boston to New York City. Mm-hmm. And that was a 275 ride over a couple of days. And that really got me interested on how to train my body, what to eat, how to recover, the importance of sleep. And I really became fascinated with all of that. And at that time, I was reading a book called Finding Ultra by Rich Roll, who also does a podcast.
Right.
Here's an ex-corporate lawyer, recovering alcoholic, now like the vegan model of health and this ultra marathon man. And I got really inspired. I had thought about ultra running at some point. I started in my 40s, didn't feel so great, but felt after doing this ride and taking really good care of myself, like maybe this was attainable.
Wow.
And so it became a great experiment, really. And what I'm really proud of is that when I crossed that finish line with a lot of energy, didn't hit the wall. In fact, I have to admit, I had a pizza and a martini with my friends that evening. But I felt great. I was really
well
proud.
Deserved.
I ate the whole thing. But it really showed that the training plan and the principles worked, and that really gave me a lot of confidence in the path that I was pursuing at the time.
So that's really interesting. So you ran an ultra marathon without being a shorter distance runner, right? So you basically just went straight for the top.
Yeah, I mean, I've run as part of my workouts. Like I was doing boot camp at the time, and twice a week I would run 3 miles. That kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I had done, a handful of, just on my own, maybe running 10Ks, or I worked up to a half marathon distance and then backed off. But yeah, it wasn't anything that was like, oh, I was this, crazy runner and just decided to add another 5 miles on and do an ultra. It really was a big goal. But also, too, from a leadership perspective, because there's a lot of leaders listening, the lessons that you learn when you're training for something like that on, showing your team the power of commitment, of taking this huge goal and being able to break it down. I mean, literally, especially when you're running a race, it is one step at a time.
Yeah.
Right? But how do you break it down? How do you open yourself to learning? How do you consistently show up for yourself when you're physically tired or you're mentally drained? The resilience of watching, your mileage grow over time, and how that the learning and the confidence and the mindset and the habit building all build into the confidence that on that day when you show up for that race, and it happened to be like 30 degrees that day, and I am not a cold weather person, to say, I can do this, like, let's do this. I think that really, it taught me a lot about myself, but also I would hope that the folks that I was leading at the time felt some inspiration from that.
Wow. That's awesome. What a story. What an inspiration for both leaders and also people who want to focus on their wellness. As entrepreneurs, we go through these things that we've never been through before, right? And sometimes they're a pandemic, and sometimes they're, just kind of going to the next step and getting the next client or whatever the case is. So
people ask me now, are you running another one? I say, right now my ultra marathon is Athena Wellness. Because it takes that same kind of discipline. It's like you're actually running an ultra marathon right now. You don't even realize it, right? But
yeah.
when you are building a business and working in business and doing your own, or building a corporate career, it's another version of ultra marathon.
Yeah. And to your point, what we do, even though we're sitting in front of our computers, takes a lot of stamina, right? It takes a lot of brain power. It takes a lot of, concentration. It takes, sort of being on your toes.
Yes.
And that's something that, if you think of it like training for something, whether it's an ultra marathon or whatever, you are training for something. That's wonderful. So tell us about your book and how we can get in everything, all that good stuff.
So the book is called The Athena Principles, Simple Wellness Practices for Overworked Professionals. And I use the word professionals very broadly. It's suitable for entrepreneurs as well. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I wrote it is because I really wanted to share this wellness philosophy, and then I created the methodology to be able to codify it so others are not following my protocols, but it's really about a framework that mm-hmm. others can tailor and make it more unique to them. That was really important to me. So it was really written to try to help readers reconnect with themselves, to treat themselves with more self-compassion, to uncover mm-hmm. deep soul-level motivation for why they may want to instill a lifestyle change, to show up for themselves consistently, as we've been talking about, with optimism right. and enthusiasm, to create a customized self-care plan for themselves, and to develop a support system for their own success. So it's really a wellness guide meant to inspire through story, like the one that I just shared. And it's comprised of, the methodology is comprised of three things: of tools, of principles, and of practices. So the tools are meant to help readers assess their current state of wellness and to track their progress. It's comprised of a holistic wellness spectrum that is really an inventory of places for folks to start mm-hmm. Their wellness journey, and then to be able to track their progress as they move forward. The 5 principles are: the first one is self-compassion, the second is intention, the third is consistency, the fourth is positive mindset, and the fifth is accountability. And then for each one of those practices, each one of those principles, there are practices. There are writing practices, mm-hmm. there are meditation practices, and then there are positive actions that somebody can take that can actually help them work through and live those principles. And so the main message is really that we can reimagine and optimize our well-being regardless of age. And I am living proof that is in fact the case.
That's fantastic. By the way, can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, something happened with my camera, so I'm going to have to be off camera.
I was keeping going. I know this is live TV.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed that I was frozen, and so I disabled my camera, and now I can't re-enable it. So sorry, but
That's
at least you hear me.
That's okay.
So what's the value of you say accountability, and that's a word that we hear a lot in the entrepreneurial world and also in the fitness world. I mean, it's nice to have an accountability buddy. What value do you see in that?
Yeah, for me, accountability is not only a systematic way to check in, which I think is really critical if you're going to have some success with not only wellness goals, but any goals. But I also include in the accountability principle the importance of celebrating wins, no matter how small, because mm-hmm. there has to be some level of enjoyment. Otherwise, people aren't going to want to keep on, kind of moving down this road, whether it's wellness goals or professional goals or personal goals. The other thing, too, that accountability allows us to do is to compassionately check in with ourselves, to make sure that we're on the right path. Sometimes we can think we want to do something, but maybe it really wasn't ours. Maybe we think it's something we should do. So it's a really nice way to check in on the shoulds and making sure that our goals are really our own and that they're critical to us, because if we can't emotionally connect with what we're trying to achieve, at some point in time, it's just going to lose steam, which is what we see a lot after New Year's. You know, about 3 weeks in, and people kind of lose steam. That could be why. It's like, I should fill in the blank of whatever that that goal is. But is it really something that's resonating with you at this point in your life? We change. Like, wellness is so fluid and ever changing. To be able to check in, I think, really keeps us on our own path, and also to realize that we make our own path. I quote a poet in the book, and the quote is, "There is no path. We make the path by walking. By walking, we make our path." So this book is not going to give somebody the answers of, you do these 5 things and you'll be well. This book asks you a lot of questions and asks you to reflect on what is it, how would you define wellness for yourself, and then what can we do to create an environment that you'll thrive in and you'll be able to achieve what you set out to do.
That's fantastic. I love that. And I forgot to ask you this question. I always ask this at the beginning, so I'm going to ask it now.
Sure.
How do you take your coffee?
Yeah, I take my coffee strong. I love my coffee. When I am out on the road or when I travel, I keep it simple. It's usually black, espresso in black coffee, maybe a splash of coconut milk. But when I'm home, there's a surfer named Laird Hamilton, and he has this whole product line of coconut-based creamers, superfood creamers.
Yep.
And so I have my coffee in the morning with a tablespoon of that, and I blend it up for a nice little coconut latte at 5 a.m.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. My thing lately has been, there's a place near me that makes an oat milk latte with lavender, and so it both wakes you up and calms you down somehow.
That's
and
nice.
So I feel like a superhero after that.
Last time I was in Seattle, a good friend of mine had an oat milk latte, and I took a sip of that, and it was really good.
Yeah.
But it didn't have lavender now. I have to tell her she has to up her game.
Yeah. No, lavender is wonderful. I find that it just like it relaxes your muscles in the right way. It's that kind of thing. So
As a wellness, I wholeheartedly endorse lavender. For sure.
That's awesome. Well, this is great. This has been great. So let us. How can we get in touch with you?
Yeah. The website is on the screen there, but I have a free download of the Athena principles and an action plan that somebody can start to implement the principles. So they can go to athenawellness.com/action plan. And the book, again, is called The Athena Principles, Simple Wellness Practices for Overworked Professionals. It's on Amazon. You can get a paperback, an ebook, or an audiobook that was narrated by yours truly.
Nice. Awesome. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for bearing with us as my camera just randomly stopped working.
That's great. Well, I thank you so much for having me on. It's been such a pleasure. I had a lot of fun.
Sounds great. We'll talk to you soon.